Hello folks and welcome. This is Clay with the DIYcave, and I'll be showing you how to whip stitch your leather pet tag. So for this video, all I will need is my pet tag, my thread, and one needle for the whip stitch. So let's thread the needle to start things off. So I'm going to take my thread and I'm simply going to poke the needle through the thread itself. I'm going to do this, let's say 1 to 2 inches up the line. So let's poke through the thread. These needles are pretty dull, but still, exercise a little caution when you're doing it. Use a thimble if you'd like. I'm going to take the needle and pull it until the eye of the needle is just about at the thread, and then I can actually thread the needle. Once I have the needle threaded, I'm going to pull the eye of the needle through that hole. And what this does is it puts the thread not only through the eye of the needle, but back through itself, creating a pinch point with this waxy thread, which will give it some friction and keep it from sliding out, hopefully. Alright, so we are good to get started. You'll notice with my pet tag, the holes are a little bigger than yours. That's because I've done a few practice runs on this tag. So I won't be getting quite as much resistance with my stitching as you will. Just food for thought. If it looks like I'm kind of cruising through this and you have to pull a little harder, that is the reason why. But everything will go through, and with the tighter holes, it'll make things nice and snug. So to start things out, I'm going to be going through this centermost hole, and make sure you have both layers together here. So I'm going to be going through the centermost hole from back to front. And I'm going to take care to leave between 1 and 2 inches of thread here in the back, and that'll come in handy when we're melting the thread down to seal everything in place. Now I'm going to move one to the right, front to back. I'm going to hold this thread in the back with 2 of my fingers, just because I don't have much material through the actual stitching holes at this point, so the thread can come loose pretty easily. And now I'm going to go back through that original hole from back to front again. And when I do this, since there's already thread through this hole, I'm going to move that thread over to one side. Let's see. So that when I go through that same hole again, I'm not stabbing through the thread. Excellent. And you'll see at this point, once we pull, the thread stays in place pretty well, so I don't really need to hold it. If you pulled really hard, there's not much friction going on, so it probably would pop out. But the sewing definitely gets easier once the thread is set in place. So I'm going to go back through that second hole again, front to back. And now I'm going to set us up to start on our whip stitching. So everything's nice and secure. I still have my tail back here for when we need to burn at the end, which will come in the next video. And now to get my whip stitching started, I want to move over to this hole right here before we start the actual whip stitching. So I'm going to go back to front through that hole. And now we are right at the border, so when I do the whip stitching, everything will look nice and even. If I had started the whip stitching from this hole, we'd have thread coming out, and it just wouldn't look nearly as clean as all the stitchings around it. You'll see what I mean here in a second. Alright, so the whip stitching is pretty straightforward. So now I'm going to go one hole over, back to front, and I'm going to just keep repeating that process. Back to front every time. And after you get a few of these done, you'll see what the end result will look like pretty quickly. Yep. I snagged the slack here, so be careful to keep that slack out of the way so you don't pinch it in the bite from your previous stitch. So we should have something like so. And we are just going to keep on doing that. So one more over, back to front. Mind the bite. And as you're going, just do a little housekeeping. Make sure these stitches stay nice and tight. And just keep on cruising. So I will leave you to it. That is the process for whip stitching, and tune into the next video and I will show you how to finish this off and burn the ends.